So next week we'll discuss David's reign with special attention, fixation actually, on the Uriah affair and Absalom's rebellion. So please read 2 Samuel chapters 2 to 24 and then 1 Kings chapters 1 and 2. And so the first two chapters of the book of Kings. So the readings for next week will cover David's reign over the United Kingdom, ending with David's deathbed instructions to Solomon, and then Solomon taking the throne after David's funeral. And Solomon here plays the role of Michael Corleone after his father's funeral in The Godfather, for those for whom this reference is not automatic. In any case, those who've seen The Godfather will remember that Michael's first act as the new Don is to settle all family business in order to secure his reign. And this is what happens in the first two chapters of the Book of Kings. So, in fact, I urge you to go to YouTube and punch in Michael settles all family business, and you'll see that scene. It's a great scene, and it's a I think it's a nice representation of what happens here with Solomon as well. It's good because look, the movie is similar to this David story, maybe even consciously so, and it shows what's involved with a successful transition of power from one king to the next. So that's that. Now I want to highlight 4 verses that you'll read in chapter 5 about David's new capital. Verses that have vexed rabbis and commentators for 2,000 years or more. So David becomes king and goes to Hebron, the cradle of Jewish civilization in the heart of the territory of Judah. Okay, that's where the patriarchs and the matriarchs are buried. That's where a lot of Jewish history is kind of pre-Joshua. Much of the history of the patriarchs takes place in that region, and there's a lot of, again, ancient Israelite history in Hebron. So that's where David becomes king, and is crowned king of first of Judah, and then now, but as part of the effort to establish a united kingdom, he later moves his seat to Jerusalem, a city that was till then held by the Jebusites and not by any Israelite tribe. And it was also on the border between Judah, David's tribe, and Benjamin, Saul's tribe, right on the border between them. So Jerusalem is geographically and politically kind of like Ottawa, okay, the Canadian capital, which is located on the border between the English province of Ontario and the French province of Quebec. Okay, so two populations that were former enemies. Here you plant a capital city right in between them. And so this choice of city for the capital was an opportunity for David to signal that he's everyone's king, okay? But also to be in position to keep a closer eye on his potential rivals, okay? Because he could doubtless anticipate correctly, as you'll read this week, or next week, that the resistance or the rebellions will come from the northern tribes. Okay, so perhaps he wants an advanced position towards the north, right in Benjamin, or on the border of Benjamin. So in in 2 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, we're told that the elders of Israel, meaning of the northern tribes, okay, remember Judah and Israel, okay, so the elders of Israel come to David and accept him as king of a united Israelite kingdom. This is, of course, after he defeats Ishbosheth and Avner, okay, after this civil war. So the elders of Israel come to him, they accept him as king of a united Israelite kingdom. And we're told there in those in those verses that he ruled X years in Hebron, the capital of Judea, and Y years in Jerusalem. Okay? And then it explains how it was that he took over Jerusalem. This is in chapter 5, verses 6 through 9. And these are the four verses that are endlessly problematic in the world of biblical commentary. Now, getting into it in depth would require more time and education than I have and probably than you have. More time than you have and more education than I have. A plain reading, and this is what I'm delivering to you, is the reading that's suggested by Professor Jonathan Grossman. A plain reading suggests that a plain reading of these four verses suggests that David approached the Jebusite inhabitants of Jerusalem, a city that had remained in Canaanite hands on the border between Judah and Benjamin. Okay, between David's tribe and Saul's tribe, between Judah and Israel, between the southern tribe and the northern tribes. Okay, and so we can surmise that David wanted that city from the fact that he will move his court to that city, and he will make it central in his administration and central in the and holy in terms of the religious worship. Okay, we can assume also that it was a strongly defended city because neither Judah nor Benjamin had been able to take it, to conquer it, since the time of Joshua. Okay. So David approaches the city's Jebusites inhabitants in chapter 5, verse 6, presumably to discuss a surrender or an alliance, given this new situation in which he rules a united Israelite kingdom that encircles this independent Canaanite city. But the city's rulers or leading families tell him that he cannot enter the city till he removes those with disabilities, the blind and the lame, from his camp. Okay? And commentators have been scratching their heads over why the Jebusites, why the leaders of Jerusalem, the rulers of Jerusalem, would make this demand. Okay? Now we know from Jewish worship that handicapped or deformed people cannot serve as priests. Okay? It's considered, I believe it's considered inappropriate for someone with an imperfect body to serve God. In any case, regardless of the reason, maybe even there's no reason, maybe it just says that this is the way it is. But in any case, in Jewish worship, a person with a handicap or a deformity cannot serve as a priest. Given that the Israelites were not aliens in the Near East, they formed as a people on the edge of Canaanite society and shared with the Canaanites a language, script, and other cultural traits. There's good reason to assume that this practice, this custom, was a common feature of clergy in the region, from Egypt to Assyria, as far as we know. And since the Bible tells us already that the city, already in the Abraham story, the Bible tells us that that the city of Jerusalem was a holy city, because you might remember that Abraham dealt with Melchizedek, the king of Salem, meaning Jerusalem. Shalem, Yerushalem. Salem, Jerusalem. Jerusalem. So Abraham dealt with Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who was a priest to the Canaanite god known as El Elyon. Okay, so we already know from the Abraham story that Jerusalem was a holy city for the local Jebusites. Okay, and therefore it might make sense that they would not allow handicapped or deformed people into this holy site. Okay, so that's their demand before they before they enter into negotiations, before they allow David to come to the city to negotiate with them. And so David then, in verse 7, captures a nearby fortress, Zion, which he renames the city of David. Okay, so he captures Zion, renames it City of David, and then after this show of force, after this show of military strength, we seem to hear David accepting the Jebusite terms and articulating an alliance between him and them. If you look at verse 8. Okay, so first, he warns his camp that anyone who attacks a Jebusite will touch the tzinor. Okay? We don't know what that means. Okay? In modern Hebrew, tzinor means hose, a hose that has water running through it. But it's completely unclear, it's completely unknown what tzinor means in the Bible. Okay? The only thing we do know is that it doesn't sound good. Okay? To touch the tzinor sounds, from the way the sentence is framed, it sounds like a punishment. Whoever shall attack a Jebusite will touch the tzinor. Okay? So David is warning his followers, his men, that anyone who attacks a Jebusite will suffer some sort of punishment. Number one. Second, he acquiesces to the Jebusite demand not to allow the blind and the lame from his camp to enter Jerusalem. They can stay in the city of David, okay, in Zion, the nearby fortress. But they must respect the Jebusite custom in Jerusalem. Okay? So Israelites will not raise a sword to a Jebusite, and Israelites will not violate the Jebusites' rule about who can and cannot enter their city, the city of Jerusalem. Okay? And then, in verse 9, there's a clarification that David established his court in the fortress in Zion, right next door in the city of David, right next to Jerusalem. Okay? He renames the fort the city of David, and he starts building a city around it, around the fort. Okay? So around the fort called Zion, he starts building a city, and he renames it, names the fort and the city around it, the city of David. So we can assume that in time, the city of David and Jerusalem became a blended single entity, like Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Urbana-Champaign, and Dallas-Fort Worth, or Tel Aviv and Jaffa. Okay? So these are two cities that kind of grew into each other. Okay? And that's how Jerusalem came to be David's and Solomon's capital, through an alliance with the Jebusites rather than through conquest. Okay. All right. Till next time. Bye-bye.